Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the book Refuge and welcome to the historical romance reader book tag. So my friend Jess over at Peace Love Books, she recently created this tag and I just wanted to jump on it. I'm kind of going to do it off the cuff. I have a couple of the books beside me just because I remembered which ones that I'd need for it, but I thought this would be kind of fun to not overthink it too much. Historical romances is one of my favorite subgenre of romance, if not my favorite one. I go through waves of it just like we do with anything. Right now, I definitely have been reading a lot more dark romance than historical romance. I love dark historical romance even more, but I thought this would be fun to just kind of jump in and do it and get this video up for you guys because it's such a fun trend and I haven't done a book tag in forever. I love what Jess said too about book tags haven't really been the thing for a while, but that used to be something I always advise people who are like new to booktube or romance booktube is to do book tags. So way to go, Jess, for creating one. I haven't created a book tag in a really long time and you're maybe inspiring me to do something like that. So let's go ahead and dive into this. She has 13 questions. Again, I wrote them down and I was thinking about a little bit as I wrote them down, but again, we're just kind of going to go off the cuff and I will put pictures up as we go. I'll scoot over a little bit so I have room. But let's go ahead and start this off. So the first question is the first historical romance. I'm going to mess this up and say romance, but first historical romance you ever read. So fun story. I've told this multiple times because as a creator who does romance novels, you get asked this all the time. What's the first one you ever read? And I actually own, and I'll show you in a second, the first historical romance that I ever read. Because I first read a historical romance in my English teacher's classroom. I think I was in 9th or 10th grade. I'd already been reading some other mass market romances like paranormal romance and stuff. And this English teacher, she had some naughtier books in her room when she taught high school. And so I believe I read this. Yes, I read this when I was in high school. And then my senior year of high school, so I borrowed this book from her room. See, it says her name on the top and everything. When I was a senior, she was going to be teaching middle school. So she had a bunch of books in her classroom that had sex scenes in them that she didn't want to bring to her middle school classroom. So between me and my best friend, she let us go through her box of books to take our faves. And so that book is The Hellion Bride by Catherine Coulter. And I'm not going to show you the step back because it may or may not come up in a question later on. But this is the actual book that I own. I believe this came out in 1993, 92 or 93. But I read this back in 2009 or whatever is when I read it, and it led me to read. So Catherine Coulter was my first historical romance author, and this was the book. And I was just so entranced by it. The story was fascinating, and I just had such a great time. So this was my first historical romance. Question 2, the last historical romance you read. So I'm going to pick up my notebook that I have these questions on, and I also write down my current thing. So I just read last week, the last historical I read is The Rogue's Proposal by Stephanie Lawrence. Here's a picture of that. I'm working my way through the Sinster series. In fact, currently, that's my current historical romance, as well as Lady Pirate. I'm reading this as a buddy read with one of my friends. And then, yeah, and I'm really loving the Sinster series. Stephanie Lawrence, she writes these amazing relationships. She writes a lot of alphas, and she writes a lot of very beautifully written sex scenes. She's known for having these 30-page sex scenes, and also lots of mutual pleasure in her books, and just the way she writes too. I love the stories. There's always a bit of a mystery going on in one of hers, and I just really am enjoying myself reading these right now. Number 3, the most underrated historical romance author. So I read a lot of these. So This is one that I'm slowly getting some of my friends to read. In fact, Jess, thank you so much. You gave me a call out for these. I have been loving Donna Fletcher this year. We came across her because of this beautiful photo. There's this beautiful cover for Bound to a Warrior, and it was showing up on Instagram, and I had to have it. I had to have it. It's beautiful. It's about this couple who are bound together, and it has such a sweet series. And so I have read 6 of her books. I ended up starting with her Sinclair Brothers series and then reading that. And there's quite a few people who, once I read it, they're like, oh yeah, I used to read these, because they're actually a bit older. Like, her books are almost 20 years old at this point. Some of them are. And yeah, I just really enjoy her. Someone else who's underrated. Oh look, I do have a Donna Fletcher book here. Here's the Donna Fletcher book. This is her first ever book, which I still didn't read yet. See, my bookmark's in there. I need to read that one. Who else is underrated? I don't know. So we'll just go with Donna Fletcher. I don't have to say a whole bunch more, so we'll go with that one. A historical romance author you haven't read yet. So actually I have a whole list about this. I wonder if it's in here. I don't know if it's in here. But I made a whole list of authors that I own lots of books by, but I haven't read them yet. And so that is one of my goals for this year, is to like try authors I haven't read. So I think the main one that I would say is probably Elizabeth Hoyt. I have her on my TBR for this month to read To Beguile a Beast. I also have been meaning to get to The Raven Prince at some point, so I definitely want to read her. Who's another author that I really want to get to? I mean, I am interested in trying some Virginia Henley books. I have had her on my TBR a couple of times, and I still haven't dived into one. I know she writes some medieval books, which those are sometimes a hard sell for me, because I'm not always like in the mood for one of those. But yeah, I think that's an author I want to try as well. So let's go with those two. An HR author you recommend to newbies. So, I mean, I think Jess says it in her video, like a lot of us are going to say Tessa Dare. I would honestly say, like, I made a whole video about this, about like historical romance for newbies. I can link that. I'll link that video so you can check it out, because it depends on what kind of like other things you like. Like I say this in this video, is that whatever kind of stories you like in other romance, that's what you should try in historical romance, because it's really not as scary as you think, you know? Tessa Dare's a great one. I used to say Julia Quinn all the time. I wouldn't necessarily say Bridgerton's the best place to start with her, but I think some of her other series, like even her first series she ever wrote with Splendid, Minx, and Dancing at Midnight, like that series is really fun. I just think that Bridgerton, because of like so much that's been said about it, I know that's where a lot of people have started because of the TV show, but I think there's other places with Julia Quinn to start that's better and could be good for newbies. Who else? I think Sarah McLean could be someone that's good to start for newbies, because her plot is really like, they're very interesting and like well laid out. And you can kind of start wherever you want to with one of her books. And she doesn't have a ton of there's not like things that would be issues in them. So yeah, let's go with those authors. I'm going to say Sarah McLean and Julia Quinn. Like, I'm just going to say those. Totally different authors, but work for it. Okay, your fave historical romance of all time. Now, I honestly don't know how the hell to answer this question. Like, it's a great question. It's a great question. You know, Jess put together some great questions, but I don't know how to answer it, because I change my opinion all the time, because just so many pop into my mind. Okay, to play the game. I would maybe say Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I have read that book so many times, and every time I find something new about it, it touches me in a different way, and it has stood the test of time for me. I have historical romances that may become my favorite of all time. when I have been with them for longer, right? Like, I agreed with both of the books that Jess said. I won't spoil it and tell you what they are if you haven't watched her video yet. I was like, those are great choices. Those are great choices. But when I think of ones I've loved the longest and consistently is a 5-star read every time I read it, it's Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. Like, it stays there for me. So I think I'm going to say that. Because again, specifically in the last like 5 years and the last 3 years of being online, I've had some historical romances that will see the test of time for me. But currently, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton is there. So, okay, number 7. Do you prefer new school or old school historical romance? So I thought this was a very clever question, but I want to break it down a little further as I explain it. Because my sweet spot that I've discovered of where my favorite historical romances are. And if you're a fan of the Fated Mates podcast, you maybe have heard Sarah and Jen mention that the romance, there's a new romance generation about every 10 years. Things make big shifts just every 10 years or so. So I'm not fully in the old school, but I'm not fully in the new school either. The sweet spot for me is actually mid-90s through 2010. A lot of my favorite historicals fit into that time period. So when we look at the lifetime of historical romances from 1970 to 2021 is where we're at with historical romances, I'm kind of smack in the middle of that right now. Because I like some of the darker problematic elements in my books. And sometimes new school authors do that well, like Kerrigan Byrne, Jennifer Ashley, and sometimes old school books do that better for me as well. So for me, it's more about the content and the theme. So I know that's kind of a wuss out answer, but I honestly fit kind of right in the middle of old and new school, because sometimes I like a more agency and how it is. But sometimes when you read an old school book, you see books where women have agency, and then it's just mind blowing because they did have this. So I like some of the older Kleypas books, which were in the early 90s and stuff. So that's really where I kind of fit, is the 90s to 2010 is where some of my favorites are. So yeah. That doesn't totally answer. What are your favorite historical romance tropes? Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So a couple of my favorite ones. So I love an arranged marriage, specifically when the arranged marriage happens in the first half of the story, because I love reading about couples who are married and they're figuring each other out. So I like an arranged marriage or a forced marriage or whatever when it happens near the front half of a book, generally. I also love a marriage in trouble in a historical. Recently, I read Stranger in My Arms by Lisa Kleypas for my book club with Crystal, and it's amazing. I love Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage by Jennifer Ashley. I love A Marriage in Trouble. And then I also really like, and there aren't many of these, but I also really like a guardian ward trope a lot. And I like it even more in historical because I just think it's so sexy. So I think that I would pick those. Because catnip to me is a second chance romance of a married couple. So a marriage in trouble, but a second chance between them in a historical. I love it so much. So let's go with that. What is your favorite setting? I think most of us are going to say the same thing. I think most of us are going to say Scotland. Jess, did you put this question in just so that you could get more historical Scottish wrecks? Is that what you're doing? Is that what you're doing? I think that's what you did. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be Scotland. A lot of my favorite historical romances fit into that, whether we're making just a trip there, whether this is where we're living at, whether it's a Scottish person coming to England, whether it's like a marriage between an English person and a Scottish person. Like, I love that setup anytime we're involving Scotland, because it's like we're already having a lot of angst, because even though they live near, like, not far from each other, there's such a chasm between people like that. And so it makes for some really contrasting situations. What is the oldest historical romance you own? Again, Jess was right. We'll probably, a lot of us have the same one. I don't have like the OG copy of this. This is the 90th printing of it, but I do have the OG. I have The Flame and the Flower. I actually think, so I also have Shanna by her, and I believe this one is a first printing. So if we're talking like physically the copy that I own, I also have some Joanna Lindsay's that might be the oldest. Yes, so this one is a 1977. I have this copy of Shanna, which was originally $3.95. It's cool. So I have the first historical romance itself, and then I also have one that's like the physical copy's really old. But I think some of my Joanna Lindsay's are that old as well. I have a lot of first edition Joanna Lindsay's that I've been collecting. What is your favorite stepback? So this is why I didn't show you the inside of The Hellion Bride. So funny story too, and I've mentioned this, so I have 2 copies of this book. This is the original copy that I own. Like, this is the first historical romance I ever read, like this book, this one. I've had it for like 11 years now. It's made every move I've ever made, but it is starting to break down. And so my beautiful friend Jessin, she got a lot of Catherine, like, not a lot, she got a lot of Catherine Coulter books that were like in pristine condition. Some of them were signed, and she got doubles of some. And so she sent me a full set of the Sherbrooke series that is perfect. So I can happily show you my favorite stepback I've ever come across. And there are some fucking beautiful ones. And it is this. It is a full page, nothing in the way. This is Ryder Sherbrooke and Sophie. And it is just magnificent. It's perfection. There are some great stepbacks out there, but this one is just, it's everything. I love it. What new releases are you excited for? So this is the one I didn't prepare for this. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Let me think through my brain. Sorry. Hold on. I have my book that, okay. There is Wicked Bargain for a Duke by Megan Frampton. I am slowly making my way through Megan Frampton's books. And she writes some fun, they're not quite rom-com-y, but they always have like a good message in them, and they're very exciting. So I really like hers. Tempting Fate by Kerrigan Byrne, which will be the 4th book in her Good Girl series, comes out in May. I'm very excited for that one. Obviously today as well, Kerrigan Byrne's book Devil in Her Bed came out. Very excited for that. Wild Child by Eloisa James. Very excited for that one. I love Eloisa James. She did not come up in this, but I'm a big fan. Big fan of hers. And I think that's everyone that I'll mention for now. So, yeah. And then the final question is creators you follow. Honestly, I think Jess did it best. She listed so many. But I'll just say my faves is Jessin from Jessin Reads Romance, Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life, also Samantha from Books with Samantha, Dana from Dana Quadrado, Book Diva, she's on Instagram, Alicia is on Instagram, and I'll just take a bunch more down. Jess has like a huge list on her video as well, which I've linked her video somewhere as well. So yeah, Jess, thank you so much for this tag. Like, this was great. I can't believe someone didn't have one already. I think there's a lot of general romance ones, but nothing quite targeted at historical romance, and there should be, damn it. So good choice. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I do have a whole playlist that has my historical romance videos and then historical romance videos of other creators as well. So I'll link those playlists here. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week and you can watch some more of them right now. Bye!